Hi, this is Janine Miller, and you are watching Pieces of Victory. Today, we have on our show Cathy Trinh. Cathy is an author of a book called The Journey, Mastering the Art of Slowing Down. She is a public speaker. She volunteers her time to help the homeless as well as women in recovery. She is a life coach. Please welcome to the show, Cathy Trinh. Hi, Cathy. How are you doing today? Nice to see you.
I'm doing good. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you so much for being on Pieces of Victory. I really appreciate it and sharing your story. And I understand that you have a book that you have launched, and it's called The Journey. Do you want to share with us a little bit about the journey?
Yeah, Janine, thank you so much. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I just do want to acknowledge how amazing you are to be able to have this platform for us authors. Yeah, the journey was inspired by my personal journey, my life story, and so it's the journey, mastering the art of slowing down. And it's funny because when people talk to me and they get a chance to get to know me, they're like, Cathy, there's nothing about you that's slow. Like everything is all on the hustle and the go. So it has been about over 15 years of writing this book, and I finally put my life story in a book and published it this past May 29th.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see great things for you. So
thank you. Thank you. I'm just really excited. It's been a long journey, and I think definitely during this time with COVID, it's very relevant since everybody's in forced isolation and quarantine, that everybody's kind of forced to slow down. So again, it's very relevant for this time and age. So,
and where could the audience purchase your book? Do you have it on the website, or
absolutely
Barnes & Noble?
Yes. So I have it's in Barnes & Noble. You can order it on barnesandnoble.com, as well as Amazon as well, and my website. So it's cathytrinh.com. So it's pretty much out there on all platforms.
Thank you. Do you want to start from the beginning of the journey? That would be wonderful. Maybe a little bit about your childhood.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So this is exciting. I get a chance to get it recorded and to speak with you about my past. So just a little bit about my background. I am not from here. I wasn't born in the U.S. I was actually born in Vietnam, and back in 1977. This was 2 years after the war ended in Vietnam. So the war ended in 1975. And so our family lived in the communist regime for about a couple of years. And after 2 years living under that condition, my parents decided that they needed to escape the regime. So we packed my parents were teenage parents at the time, and they packed myself up with them, and we tried to escape. So there was 4 attempts to get on a little boat, and there was 4 failed attempts, and on the 5th attempt we were able to get on a little boat. So we essentially the way that it was described to me was that we were at sea for 7 days, and we were lost at sea because it's a small fishing vessel. So we were launched into the ocean based on faith alone, and 7 days with dehydration and starvation, and our little boat was actually attacked by pirates as well. They came onto our little boat and took me as well. So I was kidnapped for a couple of hours, and they were able to beg for me back. And pirates left. We kept on going for another couple of days until we were swooped up by a U.S. Navy ship and pulled into shore. So at the time, during that time, there was over 700,000 Vietnamese refugees trying to escape the country. And we were so lucky that after try to be pulled into Singapore and another country, we were able to go and find refuge in the Indonesian refugee camp. And we stayed in the refugee camp for over a year. So by the grace of God, my grandmother had already found refuge in the United States because she arrived here first in 1975 when the war had ended. She was scooped up and she had to evacuate Vietnam that day on Black Friday. So we were able to reunite with her, and luckily we landed in we were sponsored to the United States in Orange County. So I've been in Orange County pretty much all my life. So, my story is, the way that I've always characterized it was I grew up in a relatively normal Vietnamese Asian household, but it wasn't as normal as I thought, because now doing a lot of reflection, there was a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of trauma when you live in the war era, and especially having to take teenagers, which my parents were 18 at the time, to be plucked out of their homeland, 4,000 miles away from their family. There's trauma that's left. So I remember growing up, and my parents had always abused. I felt like we were abused all the time, and there was just a lot of, I feel like it was domestic violence, but I really don't want to say that because it just sounds terrible for my parents to hear that from me. But that's what I felt, just growing up. So by the time I was 13 years old, Janine, I'm here. I'm in junior high school and playing basketball, playing the clarinet, and normal Vietnamese girl growing up in an immigrant household, blue-collar household. What happened to me was I discovered weight loss pills, and I didn't know. And unfortunately, what happened was I injured my right knee, and it caused atrophy in my right knee, which my one leg was tiny, the other leg was big and muscular, and I started gaining weight, and I needed to lose the weight. So when I went to the doctor prescribed me weight loss pills. I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, there was Fen-Phen, the little blue pill.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
The doctor prescribed that for you? And how old were you?
I was 13 at the time. So when you're 13 years old, the doctor hands you these pills without any life instructions on saying, okay, eat 3 square meals a day, exercise. And I didn't know, and I didn't know what healthy was. And so I developed a pill habit. And so it turned into a drug addiction, right? And I didn't know that. So I don't know if you've ever dabbled with that, but
I have. But go ahead.
Yeah, and so
I wanted to talk to you about the refugee camp, but we can talk about that later. Go ahead and finish your thought on the Fen-Phen. So he prescribes Fen-Phen pills for you. You're
so he prescribes Fen-Phen pills, and next thing you know, the FDA pulls it off the market because a lot of people started having heart conditions, and people were getting sick. They were vomiting, and there was just a lot of bodily effects physical effects to that pill. And I started feeling like there was a lot of anxiety that was coming on to me. And I didn't know what was going on. And again, I was developing this drug habit that I didn't know. I went through high school. For every emotion, every feeling that I needed, that I had, I basically sedated myself with these pills. And, right now, even in the U.S., we have a huge epidemic and, with opiates and pills. And I didn't know that I was developing this drug habit. So here I am in high school and going into college. I start dabbling with party drugs. You know, people offered me other types of pills. You know, I'm sure you've heard of like ecstasy and MDMA. And I basically started experimenting a lot. And I developed a drinking habit in college as well. So by the time I'm 22 years old, I am a full-blown drug addict, and you know, and it was obviously it was over time that happened. So by 22 years old, there's a couple of situations that have happened in my life where I felt a lot of shame with, and I never shared with anyone. And I think, you know, on your show, you know, you talk about maybe some abuse and just toxic behaviors that we all develop over time. And I had that. I hit my first rock bottom when I was 22 years old. And ended up getting married and had a child, and just kind of fast forward now, it's been years and years since I've turned back to that really addictive drug habit.
Oh, congratulations. It sounds like you were escaping. You were escaping and you were coping with something. And we're going to get into that in just a second. And I feel that that's why you were doing the drugs. You were self-medicating. Would you say correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what we do as women. And you know, there's my book, when I was doing a lot of reflection, and the reason why I wanted to write my book was because there was some deep, dark secrets that I wanted to share. And I didn't know that it had affected my behaviors in relationships with men, and you know, my workaholism, why that kicked in, and after I went to therapy and after I went to my psychiatrist, I started digging deep, like, why am I behaving the way that I do? You know, and addiction comes in all forms, as we talked about. You know, it comes in the form of alcohol, drugs, sex, love, you know, food. I was very addicted to food, because food is a substance too. If you're eating too much, you know, sugar or white flour, it does something chemically to your body. So when I first started my journey writing my book, I always told myself that my book is going to turn into a movie one of these days. And the opening scene was a 15-year-old Cathy sitting at a bus stop at 5 o'clock in the morning, waiting for a bus that wasn't going to come. And I actually got picked up because I hitchhiked to go see a boyfriend. And unfortunately, I got sexually attacked that day, and I never told anybody that. And so the opening scene of the movie in my head was that particular moment, because what happened is that launched me into silence. You know, when anybody asked me, like, how was high school? And I said, oh, high school was great. And I always had a disconnect with music, Janine, because when people asked me how high school was, the reason why there's a disconnect was I was in band, and the day that I ditched school and I hitchhiked and I got sexually attacked, I had my clarinet with me that day. And so that whole disconnect is like, don't ask me about my high school years, because for me, I was traumatized, but I never was able to share that secret. So if anything that I can say on this show is that if you have a secret, you know, go seek help for it and release it. And you don't have to bear the burden of it for as long as I did. I held that secret in for over 20 years until I recently told my parents, and, you know, and that's when the healing started happening.
Did you feel that by writing the book, it put everything into perspective, and you were healing as you were writing? You were fixing yourself, or you were going through it as an adult? So you were going back in the past, and now it's Cathy who is in the present, going back in time and almost fixing it in a mental state of mind.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I broke my book down into 3 phases of my life. So awakening your growth, which is owning your story, to first figure out what that story was, and then then merging the two of who you were and who you are now. So combining the two Cathys, and it was such a healing process. When I worked with my coach, they said it was such a beautiful story because it, and obviously, you know, too, it's very cathartic, right? We're writing our story, and you really, the way that when we write as authors now, and my through my journey, I realized that when we write something, it doesn't have to necessarily be in that exact moment of our lives, but it was like the feelings that was behind it, what happened, who that relationship was, how did that fit in our life. And so I'm just so, now I'm so empowered to get up on the podium and give me the biggest microphone, because we don't know, as speakers, we don't know where our content is going to land with a certain audience. You know, we can be speaking to this guy or this woman, and all of a sudden it's the guy in the back or the girl in the back that's actually really getting the experience for themselves. So it's like, I don't know where it lands, and I'm so excited that I have a book, and I really am the author of my life, and I know, you know, at what moment that happened to me, so I can relate to the other person. So.
Right. And now you are the captain of your own ship. It is very empowering to write that book, I feel. You are now the adult going to bat for the child in the past.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. It's so beautiful because you know, I mean, like you asked earlier, you said, is there a book deal? Or I do have a couple of producers and directors reading the book right now, and they're very intrigued with the story too. Right. And the beauty is that I already have kind of the outline of what the script looks like, and probably like yourself, you know, the opening scene for me is Cathy's already made it. You know, I feel proud of myself. I've made it. I'm on stage. I'm giving my TED Talk. And then at the end, and I flash back and take people back into my life story. We're sitting in a little boat in the middle of the ocean, and the feeling of scared and fear and all of that, and survival, right? It's like this survival mentality. And then it flashes back into, you know, our years working in corporate America, and like what happened in between, you know, the workaholism. It was coupled with drug addiction, high performance medications to boost life up. It's like, I want to get higher. I want to make more money. And then at the end of the movie, it's so beautiful because there's a little Cathy walking up on stage and looking up at the big Cathy, and we look at each other. I'm like, Cathy, we've made it. And we're like, you know, and it's like this moment where the two of us merge, and we're really holding, you know, our inner child and protecting her like we've always wanted to. So now I feel like I can share it with the world and let people know, hey, you know what? I don't know everything, but I've fallen on my face quite a few times that I can help save 10 years of your life. So I have something to share today. So I'm like really proud. I'm proud of you too for putting your book out there in the market.
Thank you so much. Let's talk about the sexual abuse for those who have been sexually abused, raped, maybe in a domestic violence relationship. Could you go ahead and tell us exactly when you finally told a counselor, told someone about what happened? Did you get some counseling? What happened? What steps did you take to recover, so we can share with the audience what they could do to help release, to heal, to get therapy?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Thank you, Janine. So, so in my drug use, I ended up making really poor choices and poor decisions, right? And it led to being in relationships that I was probably not supposed to be in at an age of 15, 16 years old. And then it got to a point where I didn't care anymore because I had already been assaulted by an older gentleman, right? It's that mindset. It's like, I don't care anymore. And now going back into my my younger years, I know that I acted out. And every time I got intimate with a man, it was not the same. It was always like, I'm not gonna let you get close to me, right? And so it happened. I hit my bottom at the age of 22 years old. I met my ex-husband who has bipolar manic depression. And I didn't know at the time that he had this mental illness. Mainly, I blocked it out because he was the one that did the intervention on me. He came in and we poured everything down the toilet, and I never looked back on that particular drug again. And
You think?
and so when I got involved with him, he helped me get into his 12-step program. And this is where the healing started. So they say that you put down the drugs and the alcohol, and you remove the chemical dependencies from your body and your psyche, right? You're no longer physically addicted to this substance anymore. But what happens is that we are left with emotional dependency. So emotional dependency can manifest into codependency and love addiction, sex addiction. And and at the time I was in this relationship thinking that we're going to fix each other, right? You save me, I'll help you. You've got this broken mind, and thank you for getting me off of my drug addiction. So from there, I said, okay, now it's been a couple of years. I haven't done drugs and alcohol. There's still something wrong with me. So what I did, how I got help, was I went and I sought out more programs. So there's AA, and then there's like over 254 other types of anonymous programs. And I didn't know that until I started digging deeper. So I found out there was CODA, which is Codependent Anonymous. I found out there was SA, which for sex addicts. And then there's SLAA for Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And so that's where I started going, there is something to be said here. Why am I not able to set my boundaries with someone that is hurting me? So I went to therapy. I walked into the first counseling session, and I started sharing about my past, and they said, okay, well, give me 5 traumas that has happened to you in your life. Let's work on those main ones first. So, for me, I don't know about you, but all my traumas, all of a sudden, it just appeared like a laundry list. Like, okay, I was attacked, and then I did drugs, and then and all of a sudden the therapist said, you know what? It sounds like to me that what happened when you were sexually attacked when you were 15, your entire existence diminished to that one moment in your life, that everything else got blocked out. So that was a really daunting moment for me, and it was an awakening at that point. And I said, yes. I can't remember anything after that. I don't remember what I wore that day. I don't remember how I got home that day. I don't even know how I survived that, really. I should have.
You're lucky that he dropped you off or whatever happened. What did happen? Or you blocked that out?
Well, I blocked it out, and I still can't remember. And so when trauma happens, right, the minute it happens, it causes PTSD. The only thing you're fearful of was that moment at the orange groves, and I remember exactly what happened. I remember the smell of the citrus smell of the tangerines in the orange groves. I remember how it felt. It was a dark, gloomy morning. It was like about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. The sun hadn't come out yet, and one of the things that I remember was there was alcohol smell in my private parts when I got home. And what they say is that fear, what happens to us when we have PTSD, fear is our senses. So what we heard that day, smelled that day, felt that day, saw, that will always stay with you, and it will create triggers over and over and over again. And so I went to therapy. I went to a psychiatrist. I kept on, those thoughts were lingering all the time. And that's where I started the healing process, because my therapist said, why don't we start journaling about it? And the beauty of the 12-step program, there's step 1 through 12. So somewhere in between, we write an inventory list. And our inventory list is like the list of people that we have harmed, or people that have harmed us that we have a resentment towards. So I took inventory, my moral inventory of my entire life, of every single person that's been in my life that I still hold a grudge with, and I took the fifth step. So when you take the fifth step, it's when you find someone that you trust and you give it over. And so I handed it over. And so I handed it over to God. So every day, that's what I do. I clean up my side of the street and I hand it over. So that's where I started the healing process, Janine, was to really take inventory of my actions. And I own up the responsibility today that I made a conscious decision that I ditched school that day. So my entire life, up until I started sharing this, Janine, was I always said that I was kidnapped that day. That's how I characterized it. But is it really a kidnapping when you jump into a man's car, a complete stranger's car? So whose fault is it? Right? Whose fault that created that story for you? So I was really confused. Yes, years and years and years, like I kept that secret because I had a lot of shame around it. But finally, I owned up on it, and I got to a place of forgiveness, because what I recognized in him was that he was an alcoholic too, and he was going through his disease. So in my book, I towards the end, I did forgive that man who attacked me. So I think when we get to a place of acceptance of our story and we own it, we look at our part and we can forgive, that's when the healing starts.
I'm just going to say my opinion here. I understand forgiving him. I can understand it. I want to make sure that you know that that was not your fault.
Yeah, it's not. I know it wasn't my fault.
Doesn't make it right for someone to rape someone. Not how you dress. Not if you were drinking. You know, it doesn't matter if you were drinking, on drugs, going into a car. You were how old? 13?
No, I was 15.
You were 15. I'm sorry. You were 15 years old. You got into the car with him. It's not your fault.
Oh, it's not my fault. Yeah, I know it's not my fault, but I had to get to that point where I recognized what had happened, because for so long, I did feel like I was a victim of. Yeah, I was blaming myself my entire life. And I did get to a place where I know that it wasn't my fault. This man took advantage of me, and so I thank the heavens. I'm sure we all have had those moments where we're like, thank God we survived. There is also a year later, I was in a terrible car accident where I lost my best friend, and I'm like, thank God we survived. And that was another one. And so today I live a very conscious life, and I want to be able to use my life story to help other women as well. Maybe that would be a campaign of no hitchhiking. I should make a campaign of do not hitchhike. It's not your fault, but you're putting yourself in jeopardy. Don't hitchhike. And that's what I did. That's young girls just don't know that. That might be my next campaign. I just created that.
That would be awesome. Very good. Taking your life experience to help someone else is wonderful. Speaking of which, let's go back to the drugs. It sounded like you quit cold turkey. You quit cold turkey?
I did.
Teamed off with other drugs and cut back on the drug. You weren't taken to a clinic or anything. You quit cold turkey. Is that correct?
Well, I did go cold turkey. And so the drugs that I was using at the time was ecstasy, and coupled with MDMA, and then coupled with methamphetamines at the time. So that was not a good mix for a college student, because ultimately I weaned off on the ecstasy, but I felt like nobody can tell that I was using speed to stay up all night and to do my homework right during college. And I thought I was being productive when I was actually going crazy. And my parents were really concerned at the time. They didn't know what was going on. And we ended up going to we went to temples, and we sought out the monks, and to see why I was so appeared to be possessed by something, but I was in the grips of an addiction.
Right.
So by the grace of God, my Eskimo, they say in program, is my ex-husband. He came into my life, and he already had experience with the 12-step program, and the only way you can do it is don't drink and use no matter what mentality. So for so many years, about 8 years, I didn't touch a drink and a drug. But then so what happened is, so that was not only my only relapse, and so I've had 2 relapses in my life, and I started building my career around who I was being, and made a lot of money throughout my career. I've had nice cars, owned a home, and I had a lot of friends. We threw a lot of parties, and I just started saying, you know what, we make a lot of money, and I can drink. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict. That's what I said. I said, if you give me a drug, I'll probably do it and not stop. And I felt that I felt like I was able to stop if I drank a glass of wine or something, but that wasn't the case. So I went on a 4-year binge with drinking alcohol. So,
Frying pan into the flames, it sounds like.
It was. I mean, like I said, we were, making a lot of money, and everybody at the company that the firm that I worked for, we threw lavish parties. We were always eating a la carte at these expensive restaurants. So, I mean, the alcohol and the booze was free and free flowing. So I was like, oh, I can afford it too, and I just started getting back into that mindset of not caring. I went away from the program for about 4 years, and then I started, and then my relationships went downhill. So I was married, and then I divorced, and I had a child, and what I saw myself get really influenced by was relationships and men. And so that was a whole long story. I got really attached to people, trying to fill that God-sized hole in my heart. And I just started chasing the wrong men down, and, thinking that, okay, well, I can afford this, and maybe he's a little deficient in this area, so it's okay. I'll just overlook that. So I was in a couple of year relationships with men that were not the right fit for me, and there was inconsistencies in people's stories, and I just ignored all of it. Like the red flags, there were none, right? And I ended up getting into relationships. I turned into someone that I couldn't recognize anymore. And finally, when my sex and love addiction kicks in, it's terrifying, because I turn into a man's worst nightmare. I'm codependent. I'm angry. I'm jealous. I'm full of rage because, don't you know who I am? Why are you talking to that girl? So I become a stalker. These behaviors come out, and it's not a good look on a woman, right? Especially a single mom. And I would get into emotionally dangerous situations with men too, where they're very inconsistent, and it didn't bother me until there was, big red flags that I had to look at. And and so I get into these bad relationships. So by the time I was diagnosed with cancer in 2018, I had to go back into the program because my love addiction kicked in, and I was feeling really helpless, and I was acting, had a lot of self-pity, and I was waiting for a guy to come in and rescue me, that whole mentality. It's either as a love addict, I would look for someone to rescue me, or I would try to rescue them, and it was very emotionally destructive.
So Cathy, can you tell me again, for our audience that they may be suffering from drug addiction, and they don't know how to stop. It's taking over their life. They're out of control. They don't know what to do. You quit cold turkey. in my opinion, I just feel it's so dangerous to quit cold turkey, and I'm glad you quit, but your life could have been at stake. Your health could have been at stake. What would you suggest to our audience how to go about? Do you know a rehab center that you could recommend? What do you suggest?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And you're right. It's very, drug addiction is very tricky. Especially when you're like in the midst of the storm, meaning that you are associating, you're hanging out with drug addicts or your dealer or friends and family who have connections. And it's essentially, it was your environment. That's who you are. That's your livelihood. And those are the friends that you think that they're your friends. And so it's that whole idea of standing too close to the tree, you can't see the forest. So you don't see that there's another possibility, another life out there that you can live into. So that is in itself, it's always a work in progress. And what I've shared with people that are newcomers in the program is I would say, if you feel like you have hit your bottom, whatever it is, it could be an emotional bottom where your life is completely unmanageable, where they say in the program, step one is if once you're powerless over X, whatever X is, and your life is unmanageable. So unmanageability could be not waking up and going to work on time, right? Or unmanageability could be someone that's starts becoming irresponsible and not paying their bills on time. Or another unmanageability is you get in car crash, you go to jail for a DUI, but then you go back out and you drink and use again. So that could be an unmanageability too, but it doesn't, you don't have to hit your complete, like your bottom where you lose everything, now you're homeless and living on the streets, to recognize that there is a problem. There's no shame behind that. When you have a problem, you can just reach out and say, you need help. So part of my story is I always thought I was unique. And when I sobered up and I got clean off of my drug addiction from meth, I walked into my first AA meeting and I said, I'm not like these people, like these Harley riding older white Caucasian men in leather jackets smoking a storm in these meetings. And I said, I'm not like you guys. I'm a college graduate. Don't you know who I am? Feeling like I had this unique characteristic that I'm not like them. Right? But then I would leave the meetings and I would be smoking and I would be chain smoking and I would be very similar. And in my story, I don't know what it feels like to be in handcuffs. I don't know what the inside of a cop car looks like, nor do I know what a jail cell looks like, or have I ever been through my drug use and all the stuff that I've done to my body and my soul. I have never gotten into legal issues because of my addiction, but I feel like for the amount of time that I was in my addiction, I was in a mental prison for a very long time.
Sure. It was your demon.
Oh yeah. It was, I was so incapacitated and,
Controlling your life. You were a zombie.
It was like I couldn't wake up, and so here we are, I'm a couple of years sober. We still have to live life on life's terms, no matter what. It's not like one day you wake up and now you're tiptoeing through tulips, and you have a brand new pair of glasses and all of a sudden you have this new language in the next 2 months. That doesn't happen. What we say in the program is that all of our life's problems did not come in one day. So it will take months, it'll take years to reframe and reprogram our mind. All I knew for the year that I was on that drug, all I knew was to wake up, where's my drug dealer and where's my pipe? That's all I cared about. I didn't care about paying the bills. I didn't care if people cared about me. It was insanity, right? So insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting different results.
In your subconscious mind. Speaking of which, I was going to mention Bruce Lipton. And if you watch one of his videos, he goes into the subconscious mind and reprogramming. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting, but we'll get back into that later. So here you were, you're addicted to alcoholism.
Yeah.
You went from drugs to alcoholism. And
well, I had a purpose. So my codependence kicked in, right? My ex-husband was going in and out of 5150s. I couldn't keep him out of a mental ward because he kept on having these midlife crisis breakdowns, and he would make poor decisions, and it caused a lot of bipolar manic depression. And when he would be manic, there was episodes all the time. So I would watch him go in and out of jails, institutions, and I kept on telling myself for 8 years, I said, I have to show him what the program looks like. So I was being really codependent. I was enabling this behavior while just like clinging on to the program. So finally, in one of the episodes that he's had 7 episodes since I've known him for the past 18 years. And there was one episode in his life where I said, enough is enough. I said, you know what? If the program of AA or the program or whatever program it is doesn't work for you, I don't want anything, because if it can't keep you out of a 5150, I don't want that program. So I was repulsed.
For those who don't know, including myself, what is a 5150?
Okay, so a 5150 is where you get hospitalized by a police or a therapist or a psychiatrist against your own will, and he would go into psychotic episodes, not taking his medication, and he would go into these psychotic episodes where he's either talking to himself or he's wandering the streets, and he would be a danger to himself or he would be a danger to other people. In most cases, he was verbally abusive, and you just was not able to be kept. He needed a place where they basically put him in. So sometimes his 5150s would be 2 weeks, or sometimes his hold would be 3 months. I saw that, and I said, if this is what sobriety looks like, I don't want anything. I was repulsed. So on one hand, in my life, I was talking to police officers about my ex-husband, and then the other side, all these people in support groups were calling and seeing how things were going. And I said, can you guys just stop calling me now? I got this program, because you guys aren't helping at all. So I went away from the program, and I did life on my terms. Right? Not on God's will. It was Cathy living life on her own terms. And my terms were, as long as I come home to my son, I'm fine. As long as I put food on the table, I'm okay. And as long as I am able to go to work, I'm okay. But there were other areas in my life where I was really deficient in, and I just started seeing myself emotionally spiral downhill, and just kind of going back into, when I was diagnosed with cancer, my relationship addiction went back up. So, everything is in moderation, and we really have to, even as somebody that doesn't have an addictive personality, we have to balance our lives in multiple areas. Right?
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, for sure.
Yeah. So,
I can identify with the addictive relationships. Even if something is toxic, I know I've stayed in toxic relationships before, sacrificing my dignity just so I wouldn't be alone. So I get it. And I finally reached a point in my life where I like myself. I don't depend on anyone at all.
That's good. Yeah, I've learned that too. I've learned how to take care of myself, and for the number of years that I have been, working on myself, I detoxed from a lot of those behaviors, right? So I stopped cold turkey for an entire half. I didn't go on any dates, and there there was a program that I put myself into. So there was, I call it baseline behaviors. There's no stalking for Cathy for a whole year and a half, and blocking all of our toxic relationships. I still don't drink, and it's been quite some time, and it feels so great to have finally to be able to set some boundaries for myself. Because as an addict, we just don't have any, and that's why we go back into the cycle, the vicious cycle. So for me, I feel like I've healed now from where I was up to date. So I'm really happy to report that I'm alcohol, drug, relationship free. Not that it's a great thing, but it's the toxic behaviors are gone now, and I'm living the life beyond my wildest dreams. I really am.
It's like telling yourself, I deserve it. I deserve better. I deserve to take care of myself. You're giving yourself permission to care for yourself.
Right.
Or you weren't. So you said you have a son, right?
I do. Yes.
A son. What was going on when it sounds like you were a functioning alcoholic, and you probably were a functioning drug addict as well. Is that correct?
I was a functioning drug addict when I was younger, right? And then I stopped with the drugs, but then the alcohol kicked in. And yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that I was a functioning alcoholic as well.
How was the relationship with your son during this time? Would you say he suffered during this time as well, or because you were functioning, he didn't see it as much, or what was going on? If you don't mind me digging.
Oh, I don't mind at all. I know my isms, and my alcoholism or my alcoholic behaviors really affected my son, because there was, for a couple of years straight, he ended up gaining a lot of weight. My son wrote my foreword, and he talked about a little bit of the abandonment, and not necessarily feeling neglected, but I know that there was a lot of that going on too. And while I was struggling, trying to find a relationship or being in a relationship for to make it one big happy family for my son, I wasn't nurturing him the way that he deserved to. So I know that he needed my help at the time, but it was really hard for me to get out of that. What was before I was even a drug addict or alcoholic, I was a food addict, and I was a relationship addict. So a lot of that, especially in sex and love addiction, there's a lot of gray areas, and I didn't know that I was so in my addictive behaviors that I did, unfortunately, I did neglect my son. And, he can attest to it too. But today, it's a completely different story. We live in a very nice area, part of town. He has his own room now. We're not packing up every single year, moving from place to place because mommy had a geographic feeling like, oh, this other place would be much better for us. But yeah, it was affecting my son. And, the one thing that I can be really proud of is that I've always kept a roof over our heads and food in our belly, and continuing to take care of both him and I financially. The unfortunate thing is Dad has been in and out of our lives. The last stint that he was in prison was almost for 2 years, and his incarceration affected my son. He didn't talk to his dad for almost 2 years. So
whether or not there's substance involved or not with parents are going to make mistakes,
right.
and not everything is going to be perfect. And I think just owning up and making changes is more than half the battle. And it sounds like you have a really good relationship with your son, and there was a lot of healing that was involved. And we're always changing. We're always growing. And as long as there's effort, and it sounds like you made the effort, you put in the time, you put in the effort to make changes to better yourself and to better the relationship with your son.
Oh, absolutely.
He sees that, and
yeah. Yeah, yeah, my son loves, I mean, him and I have a very special bond. We really do. And he can attest to that too. And we love each other so much. It's like him and I, right? And while working the steps in the program, finally, when you get to steps 9, 10, 11, 12, on a daily basis, you make, you clean up your side of the street. And if there were people in your life, whether it's living or someone has passed away, you make living amends to them. So every day, as long as I have a chance to wake up and God allows me to gives me another day, I'm making a living amends to my son. But I'm also making a living amends to my body, my mind, and my own soul. And for so many years, like, I just abused my body, thinking that this was the way out, or giving ourselves, unprotected sex, and all that. So today I truly am making a living amends to myself as well as my son. So we're in a really good, happy place today.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And like I said before, when you are going through these addictions, you were trying to escape. It took over. It took over your life. You were out of control. And yes, there were repercussions for that, but most importantly, I felt like you missed out on that part of your life because
Mm-hmm.
it was so out of control. But now you have it back, and now you're in control. And sometimes you need to see that contrast to really appreciate what you have.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
and just because I haven't done drugs, there are other things like you said, whether it's a relationship addiction or just a love addiction or fearing of being alone, so you jeopardize your integrity. And
Mhm.
I wrote about that in my book. And when you come to a place where you have self-respect, you don't need anything because you feel you. You
Yeah.
feel
Oh, absolutely. And you start feeling beautiful again, and before, when people said I was beautiful, I didn't believe it because I felt like ugly inside. And for years, we as grown women, or as we're growing up, we always talked that term abandonment, child abandonment, was always thrown around really loosely. And so I kind of threw it around thinking that was the reason, right? Child neglect or abandonment issues. And I had mommy and daddy issues. But later in life, within the past 3 years now, I learned a new term which I've really taken on, and I can actually have very distinct, I can identify it in other people too. So no longer do I use the word abandon, childhood abandonment. I say self abandon. So what we do is we self abandon. There's no more. There's no, when you use that and you reframe it that way, you can't blame anybody else. When you choose to not make your bed and you rush out the door, not brush your teeth, take care of yourself, but you're looking for a relationship, you're not you're not keeping your side of the street clean and taking care of your own home. You've abandoned yourself. Self abandonment.
interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
I can see that. And
Yeah.
a lot of people do that. A lot of people don't voice that, but a lot of people do neglect self-care.
Oh, yes. And self care. I mean, that's the act of self care is the ultimate art of, like, self love. And, I talk about a lot about that in my book as well, self love. And, and then I give, like, tips at the end. There's a 7-day guide for slowing down, and there's self care, soul care, and spirit care. And, there's decluttering. One of the biggest things during my healing process was and I don't know if you know, but there's also a program called DA for like Clutters Anonymous. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait, no, it's actually CLA, so Clutters Anonymous. And I'm like, wow. So when I went to Clutters Anonymous, I found out that when we talk about clutter, we think about hoarders, right? We go, oh yeah,
the clutter in our minds.
Yeah.
In our minds.
We're hoarding. There's clutter in our mind, but there's also spiritual clutter too that I found out, right? So we grow up, and I grew up as a Buddhist, and so along the way, I talk about the spiritual enlightenment, and then I found AA, and so there's that other spirituality aspect, and then I found Christianity, so there was more, Jesus Christ and stuff. And then my friends were Muslim. So I had all this spiritual clutter. I'm like, which direction do I go with this?
I go to.
Yeah, I know. But there was emotional clutter, and then also physical clutter, and of course spiritual clutter. But I didn't recognize. There was no distinctions with that for me. I thought everything was just a massive clutter in my garage. I thought that was the only thing that I was thinking that was clutter, right? But there is truth to clutter because it's energy. And if you don't remove the things that are rattling in your brain that's bothering you, then you'll always it's kind of like walking down a hall and a big piece of something is standing in your way. You keep walking over it instead of picking it up and putting it away. It's the same thing that's going in our brain. We need to, as coaches, or we as authors or writers, therapists, we need to take that stuff out and put it on paper and just remove it. And that's why for you too, it's probably a very healing process to get all of your stuff out onto paper. And now we don't have to worry about that. Maybe with the next book we can write is how to write a book or how to make money, So we're moving forward and we're moving past all of that. So
it's a form of decluttering, that's for sure. And again, you are an adult going through your past, and what a great experience to have you battling your own past as an adult, because then as an adult you feel more empowered than as a child. You feel so helpless. Mm-hmm. And as an adult going through this, my internal dialogue is what did it for me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and it really is. And I've gotten some really great concepts along the way as well. And what I recognize is that as we go through life, I don't know if you can grasp this concept. For me, I get it now. It's like everything in life is it's a big, giant network of conversations that's going on. So when I speak with a teacher or a guru or someone that needs mentorship, I really listen into where is that conversation coming from their past. Is it coming from a young conversation that they haven't been able to let go yet? So it's like now I walk around, I'm like, okay, I listen in on the things that people are not saying. So if they're complaining about their mom, that means that they're saying is that I haven't let go of my past yet. Or if they're complaining about something, right? It's a constant complaint. So what it looks like is a racket. So I recognize a lot of people with addiction, they have rackets. And when you don't do the step work, you hold on to these rackets, and it's basically this unwanted thought, but it keeps persisting. So I recognize what my rackets are today, and the reason why I can come into any conversation just really fully self-expressed today is because I come from a place of nothing, and I can create anything with you. Our words are so powerful, and the words that we speak into existence. And also now I recognize everything that falls out of my mouth is I am responsible for it. So it's this level of integrity with myself. So it's a new way of looking at things. What I want to manifest is I want to manifest hosting a TED Talk where I can bring in, invite the individuals that I feel has a great topic, and instead of just being on a TED Talk, why not host one and bring a gathering of individuals that are going to speak on a certain topic? So I will definitely let you know.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'm very proud of you for what you've done in your life, Cathy. You're an inspiration. And I feel that things do happen for a reason. And even though you suffered through, what did you say, about 20 years with addiction? 20 plus
Yeah.
years with addiction. And it did take away from your life, and it was a pit for you. But at the same token, I feel that that was your mission in life when you think about it in retrospect. I feel that it's built the relationship with your son, and I also feel that you are a teacher to many who are addicted. They're feeling helpless. They don't know what to do, and they can reach out to you for help to give them a better life, to help themselves give them a better life. And
Oh,
I feel that, you know, everything happens for a reason, and we go through these lessons for it's all a learning experience, and it is to help other people. If you didn't go through all of that, how could you help someone else? Text
right,
knowledge and experience are two different things. And
right.
I feel that your experience, your personal experience, will help many and has most likely helped a lot of people so far and will continue to help.
Oh, thank you, Janine. I really appreciate that. So, for a very long time, in and out of the program, I didn't see a lot of Vietnamese people come forth, and I always felt like I was different when I walked into these meetings. So I decided before COVID was to open up our Vietnamese support group, and it's the first one of its kind in the entire United States. And my number was actually published on the internet. So I am a frontliner when any Vietnamese family is dealing and coping with alcoholism. I would get a phone call in the middle of the night asking for an intervention, to help these individuals. So we are an essential worker, and we are a frontliner to the addiction and alcoholic space. And I just feel like I'm giving back today what I was graciously given by other people who has walked before me. So I'm like so honored to continue to share the message of hope to others and let them know that there is hope in the world, and you're not alone. And look at me, I've got black hair too, this dark hair Asian woman. And I think that I found my voice, and I think it's a pretty powerful one to help other Asian people to get embedded into support groups.
I wanted to ask you, I'm rewinding now and I'll probably edit this and put it up at the front. I just didn't want to interrupt you when you were speaking. Refugee camp. Can you tell me a little bit? You said you were there for a year in Indonesia?
Indonesia. Yes.
What happened at the refugee camp? Do you want to talk about it? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I wish I had recollection of it, but the refugee camp wasn't, a terrible place, because this was where these refugee camps were opened up by the countries to
Right.
allow Vietnamese boat people to find refuge there. So, from what I know,
From what your parents said, it was
what my parents has said, we were taken care of. But the interesting thing is that I didn't think about this until recently. When we got there, we were all undocumented immigrants, right? Nobody had any papers on them, and my name Cathy is not even my birth name, and even my refugee name was not even Cathy. It was 6 names. It was a collection of all my parents' names together, because they were afraid of losing their only child. And at the end of the day, I don't remember it, but I do know wartime is in my DNA, and that's just part of my story. And I come from a place of gratitude, just going back and flipping through pictures, that I was taken care of by God a long time ago.
That's an awesome story. I'm glad that you and your family made it, because when you talk about a small vessel and lost all sense of direction at one point, right?
Yeah. So what I've been told was stormy weather. We were crammed underneath the bottom of the deck of the ship or the boat, and lost at sea for 7 days with no sense of direction, and really just based on faith alone.
You
And
tell us of that in your book?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
I want to get your book. I'm excited about your book.
I'm
So
excited to get your book too.
thank you. Thank you. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about? I mean, you were saying that you went through a storm. Why don't you go ahead and I interjected. I'm sorry. You were talking about the storm. You said there were storms and you made it through the storm.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, just stormy weather and again, starvation, dehydration, and by the time we got to where we needed to be, we were safe,
Wow.
and
What a
I
story. What a
felt
story.
safe.
How's your
And
relationship with your parents today?
they're good. They're good. My parents they're always going to be who they are, and I just had to get to a place of acceptance, right? We came here. They lost contact with their parents for a long time. My father was essentially an orphan, when he was a young child, and then finally reunited with his mother years later. And it was one of the things that when I'm out there dating men, I never ask them about their lives because my parents never talk about their family. So that's one of the things that was daunting. A lot of men are. I was always like, why am I not even interested, right? Because I didn't grow up with my parents talking about their past at all. So that was a huge revelation for me. And today I have a story, and I will always share my ups and my downs and my life story with my son so that he has a beautiful story to share with his future wife or his people that he dates and all that. So I'm really helping my son recreate his story. And I feel so grateful, and I'm truly blessed. That's one of my morning practice and rituals today. I wake up, get on my knees, I pray, I journal, I meditate, and I write my gratitude list on the things that I'm grateful for today. And am I human? Sure, yeah, I fall back sometimes, but it's a daily reprieve, like anything.
And again, I reiterate, this made you who you are. So even the bad, or what you think is the bad and the ugly and the worst bottom pit, was really a journey to experience and to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there is definitely there should not be any shame in it, because it's actually part of your mission here.
Yeah. We're both on a mission, Janine.
Well, you are such a beautiful person, Cathy, and thank you so much for being on the show. I so appreciate you coming on Pieces of Victory. It is an honor to have you here sharing this story with the world, and your honesty, and you're so brave to tell it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for having the platform, and thank you for having me on. And you're a beautiful soul too, and it takes one to know one, right?
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cathy, for being on the show, Pieces of Victory, and being brave enough to share your story with all of us today. It doesn't matter what your past is. Your past can help other people today. Cathy went through over 20 years of substance abuse, whether it was drug-related, relationship addiction, or alcoholism. She uses her past today to help other people. Without that past, she wouldn't have the passion or the empathy to help other people that she does today. My name is Janine Miller, and you are watching Pieces of Victory. homeless and women in recovery. He is, oh my God, I almost mastered it. Oh my God. Of a book called The Journey, Mastering the Art of Slowing Down, which I should be doing right now.